Congratulations, Dan Brennan and Ken Hahn, for your Emmy nomination for Outstanding Sound Mixing for a Limited or Anthology Series or Movie. You're nominated for National Geographic's Genius Aretha. I'm Denton Davidson for Gold Derby, and I just want to start off asking, how did you hear the news, and what was your reaction to being recognized for your work on this project? Dan, how about you first?
I was here in the studio, kind of working on another project, and then started getting text messages, which is always a great way to find out. I tried to not keep track of it as nominations were rolling. Obviously, my fingers were crossed, but you never know how these things go. So the whole team worked so hard on the project, so it's really nice to get the recognition on such a music and sound heavy project for us to work on.
And the same with me. I was mixing another program, and the text started coming in, and I said, "Oh, look at that! How nice!" And I knew they were. I knew what day they were being announced, but somehow it slipped in the calendar. So it was a nice surprise.
And Ken, you've actually won 4 Emmys, beginning with your first in 1983. Since then, you've gotten one every decade: 1996, 2002, 2016. Were your next 3. So you're right on pace for your 2020s win. The projects you've won for in the past have been pretty music driven. Are those the types of projects you look for?
Actually, I'll make a slight correction. Those are the primetime Emmys. I've got 2 daytime Emmys also. One for Pee-wee's Playhouse, which I'm particularly proud of, which wasn't music driven, different music driven. But
I was a huge fan.
It is interesting. I do a lot of music oriented shows, and it just so happens I think that they appeal to people too. I'm very proud of those shows, but I'm equally proud of one for a documentary on 9/11 that is certainly not music driven. But I sort of been in that circle. I think that a lot of us mixers have grew up in the music world, and particularly like mixing live music. But in this particular case, Dan actually ended up doing the heavy lifting of bringing all the music together. I was primarily in the dialogue room, but certainly made. I wasn't afraid to tell Dan what I thought about what direction we should go in, as well as everyone else putting in there.
I mean, it was definitely highly collaborative on that side. I mean, just schedule wise, we had a lot of content to get through. So the first day, Ken would dive into dialogue. I would do kind of a preliminary pass on music. And then once we were both on the stage together, we'd bring it all in. And yeah, I mean, we were always bouncing off each other for input, because we were bouncing music between all sorts of different environments, whether it was in the studio or live, or while they were performing it, or maybe she's just figuring it out on a piano, and jumping around all these perspective changes. It was always like, does this feel right in this room? Does it feel like we're in this ballroom in Amsterdam? Does it feel like we're in Muscle Shoals? Like all these different spaces. And then also, does it feel like what you think of when you hear the song? Because we're recreating these classic hits and trying to get that vibe and that sound. So it, we're not trying to mirror it, but we want it to at least evoke the same emotion and kind of the same feel.
And is there a sense of added pressure when you're working on a project where you're dealing with such a famous icon and her music is so legendary, that you need to bring that all back to life on screen again?
Absolutely. And it really is, part of it is that people's memories of the songs and the memories of where they heard them and what they were doing and who they were with, and that changes the feeling also. And as Dan said, where they are now being performed, whether it be on stage or in studio and rehearsal, that changes too. And we're trying to be true to the space, but true to the song also. And this show is unique in that it's not just a music show. It's almost a documentary of her life. It's following her life, and with flashbacks, but we see her grow, physically and musically. And so jumping from dialogue to big music and everything, you want every word to be heard, but you want the music to pop out too. So the tricks that I think the execution of doing that in a seamless way, so you don't feel like, oh, I don't hear the words. We come into this great concert and jumping, and all of a sudden we have an intimate scene. how do you make that work? How do we make that work so the bottom doesn't fall out? And the issue of the people mixing at home with a remote control doesn't come up.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely pressure for that kind of like well-known song though too. I mean, we like Ken was saying, we talked a lot about like, what do you don't listen to the song, but think about, Never Loved a Man or something. And like, what does it sound like in your head? Like, all right, what do you remember from that? I remember the piano part. I remember this section. And then, I mean, there was definitely pressure going into it because we hadn't, we get it kind of at the very end. So production's happening. We know it's coming down the pipe. But we hadn't heard anything yet. And I remember the first time we pulled up some of the songs on the stage and I was like, all right, like we have to hit this bar, this like this really famous level. It's got to kind of be up there. And I mean, so much credit goes to Cynthia. Like, she leans into the first couple songs and I was just like, oh, okay, this is going to be fine. This is what we're already in good shape, just where she was at. So she did such a stupendous job. And the fact that, I mean, the bulk of those songs were recorded live on set. So Jay Meager, our production sound guy, did a great job capturing it. Cynthia just killed the performance. And like in a show like this, it would almost always be either pre-record or we'd post-record it after just to get it clean. And she just went for it. And I think it sells the intimacy. I think it comes across really authentic. Like I think that makes it really special.
Right. And I may add that a lot of feature films especially have music mixers, and a lot of stuff is pre-mixed when it comes to the stage. This was prepared but not pre-mixed, so a lot of the musical decisions and how tracks were treated, where they were panned and how they were spaced, and all that balancing was done on the stage, whereas oftentimes it's done as a separate pass. But on this program, it really was all in all the time.
And the episode highlighted for Emmys is Respect, which is the first episode of the series. Right off the top, there's just so many intricacies, like the flashing bulbs from the cameras, straight to the live performance of Chain of Fools, TV reporters, and it's all just quickly edited together. It's like a buffet of sound right off the top. What's your process in that, and what's your space in getting the right mixture in those quick edits like that?
So I'll jump in on that if you want to first, Ken. And I want to make sure we give a nod to Danny Pagan, who is our West Coast sound soup and sound effects editor. All that cool design stuff at the top, he killed it on. So all of that cool bulb flashing stuff, that really neat design stuff that kind of gets us in with her there. I mean, that opening sequence, was a beast, honestly. I'm trying to remember from my perspective, Ken. I feel like I was really obsessed with Chain of Fools and getting that right in the space, but then you have all of these that whole interview section where we're going from huge music to all the reporters handing off to her and back and forth. I mean, maybe you can speak better to kind of carving that out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, when you say how you approach it, the first thing I do when I watch any program, when I work on it, is just watch it. No pencil, no pen, just watch it to get my first reaction. What worked, what didn't, what is cool, what do you think we need to help? And yeah, and mind you, there was a cut of that which we did pre-COVID, and then there were reshoots. So we had a second shot at that show, and part of what changed was that the opening 10 minutes, I'd say, Dan, right? Not the studio, but things were adjusted. So we had this, I don't know what, 6 months, 8 months period of sitting on it and then getting reintroduced to the show. And it was, in a way, for us, it was kind of cool. Because now we've worked on a few other shows. Now we can bring what we know about what's coming in the future, to bear on how we're going to unveil the show, per se.
It's true. Again, I mean, it's a good point, because I think we were a few episodes in by the time we circled back to one, right? So like we had already hit episode 3 or 4 and kind of established what kind of kind of the live music performance vibe was, and how big the crowd was, and how much interaction we wanted, which, you know, was something we kind of discovered across the whole series of how much we wanted kind of the crowd interacting with her, and how much we wanted to feel part of it. So that open has a ton of crowd, a ton of group in there, kind of performing right along with her, and that was something that we didn't really kind of establish a baseline for until a few episodes later. So being able to go back and hit that open again was a really nice gift, actually.
Yeah, and I might say that Dan and I share, and luckily the producers too, the idea that music doesn't take place in a vacuum. It's not necessarily about the music. It's about the audience and the reaction, and particularly in the gospel stuff, the audience reaction is feeding the singer, and the singer is feeding the audience. So if you don't play that, they're almost on equal setting. You know, audience participation is key to how she grew up with music, and you see it reflected in her lyrics later on. A lot of the music is call and response, just like she did in the church. And so we really tried to play that up, that aspect of the audience is right there. And when we're in the studio, we do the other. We pull it way back. We try to make it a little more isolated. Like we both worked in studios, both around recording. You want to at least suggest it. You can't do it 100%, but you can suggest it. You know, less reverb, less finished mix. Dan would sort of not make it perfect when it first rolled, so that by the time we're into the song, it's grown, and you're often usually not aware of those subtleties, but you certainly your brain is appreciating it. I think if you do notice it.
And that's recording session. She's recording "I Never Loved a Man," and then it's her voice. Those musical instruments come in, and there's also different voices coming through the control room, and it sounds like they're in the control room. So, you know, what's the challenge of mixing all of that together?
You want to take that one, Ken?
But we certainly, it was a team. We were on the same page with it, and we in our pre-mixing we sort of set it up, and then we said, oh, you got a cool sound on that speaker. Let me duplicate that on my end. And we definitely tried to we grew up in that world, and if you're in that world, you know what those two spaces sound like. And we were provided with, by the sound team, the little buzzes and hums that were in the control room that weren't in the studio, the chatter of the musicians, all kind of help us be in a place, be in that place. And like in the end, when she does her overdubs, Dan changed that perspective.
Yeah, so you're more almost in her head. You're in the moment with her, and that was always the conversation we were having. Was kind of like, you know, where are we? Do we, you know, all right, so we're in the studio, so we want a little bit more of a live feel, like Ken was saying, but we're not quite fully in the song yet, so we leave it a little bit drier. We're in the space. Then we cut to the control room and say Wexler's talking to the engineer, whatever's going on, we hear it coming through the speakers, but we need to hear their dialogue. But we still want to feel the vibe of the music. Now we cut back to the live room again, and we're in the song. So now we do like a little bit more polish. We kind of open the whole space up a little bit more, and you're kind of in it. And this was kind of this is why the music team almost had to deliver us. Both Raphael Sadiq and Jamil did a great job, like getting the players in it, hitting the vibe, and like the performances are great. But they delivered us stems that were pretty dry, which we needed because we put them in so many different spaces where they couldn't be too processed already. We didn't want it to sound like someone just turned an album on and, you know, it's also this music just is kind of playing over the scene. It needed to live in the story, but we were jumping around to different locations so much. It's a lot of perspective jumps throughout the whole show, it's a fun part. I mean, one of the big things Ken and I talked about throughout the show was transitions. And so much of the show is about handing off from these different moments.
Right. Either be a flashback, time period change, time jumps, or location jumps, and sometimes we go back to those locations. And I will say that we were in the process that we had to use for playbacks. We got feedback from 20 people watching our mix stand. Was that what it was? We maxed out the system.
At one point, I think. Yeah.
Sets of ears. And we would look at each other by the end of the playback and say, wow, we didn't get any notes on that stuff. The stuff that we were like, well, is this right? Yeah, did anyone? And we oftentimes look at you, whoa, those went just right by. And the ones that we thought would go by, no, we got notes on those. But a lot of the things that we did, we were like, good, we're all on the same page. How good is that? And we said, all right, let's go to episode 2, 4, 6. And it kind of built, and the people with the vision were, I think, we're all on the same page. It was very nice. It was a lot of fun to work with, for sure.
I was going to ask, does it make a difference to you when you're working on a period piece? I can see that party in the living room, and you have those old vinyl records playing in the background, but the conversations are still top of mind and clearly heard. Does that matter to you in your process at all, or is it still the same equipment? Everything is the same for you?
It matters, but it's so story dependent and kind of what we want the scene to say. And this is actually an interesting piece, because sometimes it really was about like, oh, how you say the more recording studios, like how does that gear sound? How does this recording sound, as opposed to the stuff when we get to, the last episode and we're up in the 80s and we're like, oh, these recordings need to sound like they're from the 80s now, and we need to do different processing, a whole different treatment here. Like the flashback moments where, yeah, there's a record playing on the side, we just want it to feel like that vibe and that party feels like. And it's a pretty common movie TV thing to kind of play up that music maybe a little bigger than it would actually feel in that space, just because it's a party and you're trying to get the energy up. But you also need to be aware of the dialogue and kind of jumping around between those two moments there.
And so when we see those scenes from like the church and we're hearing the audience giving the callbacks, how different is that from like a live performance of Aretha's in concerts, and maybe feeling like there we're an audience member and at church we're a parishioner? What's the difference in how you set the mood for those things?
I mean, those are there's a great moment. It's episode 6, which is Amazing Grace, which is where because you can go and actually watch the documentary that they shot there, which is amazing. And we had made sure we're obviously very aware of what that actual looked like and what it sounded like. I remember I told Ken the story where we were putting the pieces together, and I spot checked back to the original doc, because I was trying to remember kind of like what the vibe of that room sounded like. And I was like, oh, the audience is so in it. I was like, it's so much fun. There's so many shout outs, there's so many call outs from the audience, in a way that if I was just going to mix it, honestly, I wouldn't have them so upfront. My instinct would be to, oh no, let the music carry it. The audience is there, but not so involved. And having that reference of like, no, this is what it was like. These people are just all in. She has them just in the palm of her hand in these performances, and it's there, and there's so much reaction, and it's great. And it was so much fun for us to be able to pull that and make that part of the scene, and part of, like Ken was saying, that call and response from the gospel scene, which we normally, honestly, in a lot of shows, even if we try to do that stuff, we have a lot of showrunners, directors, producers who ask, let's pull it back a little bit. I don't want to hear quite so much. We want to focus on these things. And for us, it's so much fun to put the audience in with the audience. So you're at home, you feel a little bit more in it. You feel those shout outs from the surrounds. You feel it kind of all kind of coming at you. And a lot of that stuff was like ADR and loop group that was recorded after, that gets dropped in after the fact. And that's a whole separate part of the process of finding those takes and getting that work in there. Ken, what do you, is that kind of what you're thinking too?
No, I think that and I think that because we didn't have the opportunity to mix the shows chronologically, we were sort of building a mental library of how her audiences have reacted, whether the church or her friends, and that's what that last performance really was, a lot of her biggest fans and biggest friends. So how our mental library of what she should sound like was we were able to apply that to different places. Oh, this guy had a great response in this show. We need something like that. We can't take it, but this will fill this hole nicely. And it really is. I would say it's like watching a basketball team and I was always taught, move without the ball. We're directing where you should be looking. We have the ball, but we're looking where the ball is going to go next. And so I think that's, is it a call and response? Is it a cut to the drummer that we need to push? Is it a background singer? Is it, Aretha nailing it? Playing the piano, and we're taking the equivalent of the viewer's eye, the viewer's ear, from place to place, and highlighting what we all, not just Dan and I, but we all think should be, forefront.
There's just so many moving pieces of the tiniest elements. If you pay close attention, it's just incredible what you guys are able to pull and highlight. It seems like it would take way more hours than I could count. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
I just want to say, both to Dan and Ken, we certainly wish you good luck at the upcoming Emmys this year. It's a well-deserved nomination. I want to encourage our viewers to go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the Emmys and beat the top experts, and also check out more interviews with top Emmy contenders like Dan and Ken. Both of you, thanks so much for chatting with me today about Genius Aretha.
Thanks so much, Dan.
Very much.